Welcome back to Bedtime Stories to Read You to Sleep. My name is Envy, and we are continuing to read the Divergent series by Veronica Roth. Chapter 7. When all the initiates stand on solid ground again, Lauren and Four lead us down a narrow tunnel. The walls are made of stone, and the ceiling slopes, so I feel like I'm descending into the heart of the earth. The tunnel is lit at long intervals, so in the dark space between each dim lamp, I fear that I am lost, until a shoulder bumps mine. In the circles of light, I am safe again. The erudite boy in front of me stops abruptly, and I smack into him, hitting my nose on his shoulder. I stumble back and rub my nose as I recover my senses. The whole crowd has stopped, and our three leaders stand in front of us, arms folded. "This is where we divide," Lauren says. "The Dauntless-born initiates are with me. I assume you don't need a tour of the place." She smiles and beckons toward the Dauntless-born initiates. They break away from the group and dissolve into the shadows. I watch the last heel pass out of the light and look at those of us who are left. Most initiates were from Dauntless, so only 9 people remain. Of those, I'm the only abnegation transfer, and there are no amity transfers. The rest are from erudite, and surprisingly, candor. It must require bravery to be honest all the time. I wouldn't know. Four addresses us next. "Most of the time I work in the control room, but for the next few weeks, I am your instructor," he says. "My name is Four." Christina asks, "Four? Like the number?" "Yes," Four says. "Is there a problem?" "No." "Good. We're about to go into the pit, which you will someday learn to love. Christina snickers. "The pit? Clever name." Four walks up to Christina and leans his face close to hers. His eyes narrow, and just for a second, he stares at her. "What is your name?" he asks quietly. "Christina," she squeaks. "Well, Christina, if I wanted to put up with Candor's smart mouths, I would have joined their faction," he hisses. "The first lesson you learn from me is to keep your mouth shut. Got that?" She nods. Four starts towards the shadow at the end of the tunnel. The crowd of initiates moves in silence. "What a jerk," she mumbles. "I guess he doesn't like to be laughed at," I reply. It would probably be wise to be careful around Four, I realize. He seemed placid to me on the platform, but something about that stillness makes me wary now. Four pushes a set of double doors open, and we walk into the place he called the pit. "Oh," whispers Christina. "I get it." Pit is the best word for it. It's an underground cavern so huge I can't see the other end of it from where I stand, at the bottom. Uneven rocks rise several stories above my head. Built in the stone walls are places for food, clothing, supplies, and leisure activities. Narrow paths and steps are carved from the rock that connect them. There are no barriers to keep people from falling over the side. A slant of orange light stretches across one of the rock walls. Forming the roof of the pit are panes of glass, and above them, a building that lets in sunlight. It must have looked like just another city building when we passed it on the train. Blue lanterns dangle at random intervals above the stone fass, similar to the ones that lit the choosing room. They glow brighter as the sun dies. People are everywhere, all dressed in black, all shouting and talking, expressive, gesturing. I don't see any old people in the crowd. Are there any old Dauntless? Do they not last that long? Or are they just sent away when they can't jump off moving trains anymore? A group of children run down a narrow path with no railing so fast my heart pounds, and I want to scream at them to slow down before they get hurt. A memory of the orderly abnegation streets appears in my mind. A line of people on the right, passing a line of people on the left. Small smiles and inclined heads and silence. My stomach squeezes. But there is something wonderful about the dauntless chaos. If you follow me, says Four, I'll show you the chasm. He waves us forward. Four's appearance seems tame from the front, by dauntless standards. But when he turns around, I see a tattoo peeking out from the collar of his t-shirt. He leads us to the right side of the pit, which is conspicuously dark. I squint and see that the floor I stand on now ends at an iron barrier. As we approach the railing, I hear a roar. Water, fast-moving water, crashing against the rocks. I look over the side. The floor drops off at a sharp angle, and several stories below us is a river. Gushing water strikes the wall beneath me and sprays upward. To my left, the water is calmer, but to my right, it is white, battling with rock. The chasm reminds us that there's a fine line between bravery and idiocy, Four shouts. A daredevil jump off this ledge will end your life. It has happened before, and it will happen again. You've been warned. This is incredible, says Christina, as we all move away from the railing. Incredible is the word, I say, nodding. Four leads the group of initiates across the pit toward a gaping hole in the wall. The room beyond is well lit enough that I can see where we're going. A dining hall, full of people and clattering silverware. When we walk in, the dauntless inside stand. They applaud. They stamp their feet. They shout. The noise surrounds me and fills me. Christina smiles, and a second later, so do I. We look for empty seats. Christina and I discover a mostly empty table at the side of the room, and I find myself sitting between her and Four. In the center of a table is a platter of food I don't recognize. Circular pieces of meat wedged between round bread slices. I pinch one between my fingers, unsure what to make of it. Four nudges me with his elbow. It's beef, he says. Put this on it. He passes me a small bowl full of red sauce. You've never had a hamburger before? Asks Christina, her eyes wide. No, I say. Is that what it's called? Stiffs eat plain food, Four says, nodding at Christina. Why? She says. I shrug. Extravagance is considered self-indulgent and unnecessary. She smirks. No wonder you left. Yeah, I say, rolling my eyes. It was just because of the food. The corner of Four's mouth twitches. The doors to the cafeteria open, and a hush falls over the room. I look over my shoulder. A young man walks in, and it's quiet enough that I can hear his footsteps. His face is pierced in so many places I lose count, and his hair is long, dark, and greasy. But that isn't what makes him look menacing. It's the coldness of his eyes as they sweep across the room. Who's that? Hisses Christina. His name is Eric, says Four. He's a dauntless leader. Seriously? But he's so young. Four gives her a grave look. Age doesn't matter here. I can tell she's about to ask what I want to ask. Then what does matter? But Eric's eyes stop scanning the room, and he starts toward a table. He starts toward our table, and drops into the seat next to Four. He offers no greeting, so neither do we. Well, aren't you gonna introduce me? He asks, nodding to Christina and me. Four says, this is Triss and Christina. Ew, a stiff, says Eric, smirking at me. His smile pulls at the piercings in his lips, making the holes they occupy wider, and I wince. We'll see how long you last. I mean to say something, to assure him that I will last. Maybe. But words fail me. I don't understand why, but I don't want to look at Eric any longer. But I don't want Eric to look at me any longer than he already has. I don't want him to look at me ever again. He taps his fingers against the table. His knuckles are scabbed over, right where they would split if he punched something too hard. What have you been doing lately, Four? He asks. Four lifts a shoulder. Nothing, really, he says. Are they friends? My eyes flick between Eric and Four. Everything Eric did, sitting here, asking about Four, suggests that they are. But the way Four sits, tense as pulled wire, suggests that they are something else. Rivals, maybe. But how could that be if Eric's a leader and Four is not? Max tells me he keeps trying to meet with you and you don't show up, Eric says. He requested I find out what's going on with you. Four looks at Eric for a few seconds before saying, tell him that I'm satisfied with the position I currently hold. So he wants to give you a job. The rings in Eric's eyebrow catch the light. Maybe Eric perceives Four as a potential threat to his position. My father says that those who want power and get it live in terror of losing it. That's why we have to give power to those who do not want it. So it would seem, Four says. And you aren't interested? I haven't been interested for 2 years. Well, says Eric, let's hope he gets the point then. He claps Four on the shoulder, a little too hard, and gets up. When he walks away, I slouch immediately. I had not realized that I was so tense. Are you two friends? I say, unable to contain my curiosity. We were in the same initiate class, he says. He transferred from erudite. All thoughts of being careful around Four leave me. Were you a transfer too? I thought I'd only have trouble with the candor asking too many questions, he says coldly. Now I've got stiffs, too. It must be because you're so approachable, I say flatly. You know, like a bed of nails. He stares at me, and I don't look away. He isn't a dog, but the same rules apply. Looking away is submissive. Looking him in the eye is a challenge. It's my choice. Heat rushes into my cheeks. What will happen when this tension breaks? But he just says, careful, Triss. My stomach drops like I just swallowed a stone. A dauntless member at the other table calls out for his name, and I turn to Christina. She raises both eyebrows. What? I ask. I'm developing a theory. And it is? She picks up her hamburger, grins, and says that you have a death wish. After dinner, Ford disappears without a word. Eric leads us down a series of hallways without telling us where we are going. I don't know why a dauntless leader would be responsible for a group of initiates, but maybe it's just for tonight. At the end of each hallway is a blue lamp, but between them it's dark, and I have to be careful not to stumble over uneven ground. Christina walks beside me in silence. No one told us to be quiet, but none of us speak. Eric stops in front of a wooden door and folds his arms. We gather around him.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Eric, he says. I'm one of the 5 leaders in Dauntless. We take the initiation process very seriously here, so I volunteered to oversee most of your training.
The thought makes me nauseous. The idea that a dauntless leader will oversee our initiation is bad enough, but the fact that it's Eric makes it seem even worse.
Some ground rules, he says. You have to be in the training room by 8 o'clock every day. Training takes place every day from 6 to 8, with the break for lunch. You're free to do whatever you like after 6. You'll also get some time off between each stage of initiation.
The phrase, "do whatever you like," sticks in my mind. At home, I could never do what I wanted, not even for an evening. I had to think about other people's needs first. I didn't even know what I liked to do.
You're only permitted to leave the compound when accompanied by a dauntless, Eric adds. Behind this door is the room where you will be sleeping for the next few weeks. You'll notice that there are 10 beds and only 9 of you. We anticipated a higher proportion of you would make it this far.
But we started with 12, protests Christina. I close my eyes and wait for the reprimand. She needs to learn to stay quiet.
There's always at least one transfer who doesn't make it to the compound,
says Eric, picking at his cuticles. He shrugs.
Anyway, in the first stage of initiation, we keep transfers and Dauntless-born initiates separate, but that doesn't mean you are evaluated separately. At the end of initiation, your rankings will be determined in comparison with the Dauntless-born initiates, and they're better than you already, so I expect...
Rankings? Asks the mousy-haired erudite girl to my right.
Why are we ranked?
Eric smiles, and in the blue light, his smile looks wicked, like it was cut into his face with a knife.
Your ranking serves 2 purposes, he says. The first is that it determines the order in which you'll select a job after initiation. There are only a few desirable positions available.
My stomach tightens. I know by looking at his smile, like I knew the second I entered the aptitude test room, that something bad is about to happen.
The second purpose, he says, is that only the top 10 initiates are made members.
Pain stabs my stomach. We all stand still as statues. And then Christina says, "What?"
There are 11 Dauntless-born initiates, and 9 of you. 4 initiates will be cut at the end of stage 1. The remainder will be cut after the final test.
That means that even if we make it through each stage of initiation, 6 initiates will not be members. I see Christina look at me from the corner of my eye, but I can't look back at her. My eyes are fixed on Eric and will not move. My odds, as the smallest initiate, as the only abnegation transfer, are not good.
What do we do if we're cut?
Peter says.
You leave the Dauntless compound,
says Eric indifferently,
and live factionless. The mousy-haired girl clamps her hand over her mouth, and stifles a sob. I remember the factionless man with the gray teeth, snatching a bag of apples from my hands, his dull, staring eyes. But instead of crying like the erudite girl, I feel colder, harder. I will be a member. I will. But that's not fair, the broad-shouldered candor girl Molly says. Even though she sounds angry, she looks terrified. If we had known... Are you saying that if you had known before the choosing ceremony, you wouldn't have chosen Dauntless? Eric snaps. Because if that's the case, you should get out now. If you were really one of us, it wouldn't matter to you that you might fail. And if it does, you're a coward. Eric pushes the door to the dormitory open. You chose us, he says. Now we choose you. I lie in bed and listen to 9 people breathing. I've never slept in the same room as a boy before, but here I have no option, unless I want to sleep in the hallway. Everyone else changed into the clothes the Dauntless provided for us, but I sleep in my abnegation clothes, which still smell like soap and fresh air, like home. I used to have my own room. I used to see the front lawn from the window and beyond it, the foggy skyline. I'm used to sleeping in silence. Heat swells behind my eyes as I think of home, and when I blink, a tear slips out. I cover my mouth to stifle a sob. I can't cry. Not here. I have to calm down. It will be all right here. I can look at my reflection whenever I want. I can befriend Christina and cut my hair short and let other people clean up their own messes. My hands shake and tears come faster now, blurring my vision. It doesn't matter that the next time I see my parents on visiting day, they'll barely recognize me, if they come at all. It doesn't matter that I ache at even a split-second memory of their faces. Even Caleb's, despite how much his secrets hurt me. I match my inhales to the inhales of the other initiates, and my exhales to their exhales. It doesn't matter. A strangled sound interrupts the breathing, followed by a heavy sob. Bed springs squeal as a large body turns, and a pillow muffles the sobs, but not enough. They come from the bunk next to mine. They belong to a candor boy, Al, the largest and broadest of all the initiates. He's the last person I expected to break down. His feet are just inches from my head. I should comfort him. I should want to comfort him. Because I was raised that way. Instead, I feel disgust. Someone who looks so strong shouldn't act so weak. Why can't he just keep his crying quiet like the rest of us? I swallow hard. If my mother knew what I was thinking, I know what look she would give me. The corners of her mouth turned down, her eyebrows set low over her eyes. Not scowling, almost tired. I drag the heel of my hand over my cheeks. Al sobs again. I almost feel the sound grate into my own throat. He's just inches away from me. I should touch him. No. I put my hand down and roll to my side, facing the wall. No one has to know I don't want to help him. I can keep that secret buried. My eyes shut, and I feel the pull of sleep. But every time I come close, I hear Al again. Maybe my problem isn't that I can't go home. I will miss my mother and father and Caleb and evening firelight and the clack of my mother's knitting needles.
But that's not the only reason for this hollow feeling in my stomach. My problem might be that even if I did go home, I wouldn't belong there, among people who give without thinking and care without trying. The thought makes me grit my teeth. I gather the pillow around my ears to block out Al's crying and fall asleep with a circle of moisture pressed to my cheek. Chapter 8. The first thing you'll learn how to do today is shoot a gun. The second thing is how to win a fight. Four presses a gun into my palm without looking at me and keeps walking. Thankfully, if you're here, you already know how to get on and off a moving train, so I don't need to teach you that. I shouldn't be surprised that the Dauntless expect us to hit the ground running, but I anticipated more than 6 hours of rest before running again. My body is still heavy from sleep. Initiation is divided into 3 stages. We will measure your progress and rank you according to your performance in each stage. The stages are not weighed equally in determining your final rank, so it is possible, though difficult, to drastically prove your rank over time. I stare at the weapon in my hand. Never in my life did I expect to hold a gun, let alone fire one. It feels dangerous to me, as if just by touching it I could hurt someone. We believe that preparation eradicates cowardice, which we define as the failure to act in the midst of fear, says 4. Therefore, each stage of initiation is intended to prepare you in a different way. The first stage is primarily physical, the second, primarily emotional, the third, primarily mental. But what? Peter yawns through his words. What does firing a gun have to do with bravery? 4 flips the gun in his hand, presses the barrel to Peter's forehead, and clicks a bullet into place. Peter freezes with his lips parted, the yawn dead in his mouth. Wake up, 4 snaps. You're holding a loaded gun, you idiot. Act like it. He lowers the gun. Once the immediate threat is gone, Peter's green eyes harden. I'm surprised he can stop himself from responding. After speaking his mind all his life in candor, but he does, his cheeks red. And to answer your question, you're far less likely to soil your pants and cry for your mother if you're prepared to defend yourself. 4 stops walking at the end of the row and turns on his heel. This is also information you may need later in stage 1, so watch me. He faces the wall with targets on it. 1 square of plywood with 3 red circles on it for each of us. He stands with his feet apart, holds the gun in both hands, and fires. The bang is so loud it hurts my ears. I crane my neck to look at the target. The bullet went through the middle circle. I turn to my own target. My family would never approve of me firing a gun. They would say that guns are used for self-defense, if not violence, and are therefore self-serving. I push my family from my mind, set my feet shoulder-width apart, and delicately wrap both hands around the handle of the gun. It's heavy and hard to lift away from my body, but I want it to be as far away from my face as possible. I squeeze the trigger, hesitantly at first, then harder, cringing away from the gun. The sound hurts my ears, and the recoil sends my hands back toward my nose. I stumble, pressing my hand to the wall behind me for balance. I don't know where my bullet went, but I know it's not near the target. I fire again and again, and none of the bullets come close. Statistically speaking, the erudite boy next to me, his name is Will, says, grinning at me,
You should have hit the target at least once by now, even by accident. He is blonde, with shaggy hair and a crease between his eyebrows. Is that so? I say with that inflection. Yeah, he says. I think you're actually defying nature. I grit my teeth and turn toward the target, resolving to at least stand still. If I can't master the first task they give us, how will I ever make it through stage 1? I squeeze the trigger hard, and this time I'm ready for the recoil. It makes my hands jump back, but my feet stay planted. A bullet hole appears at the edge of the target, and I raise an eyebrow at will. You see, I'm right. The stats don't lie, he says. I smile a little. It takes me 5 rounds to hit the middle of the target, and when I do, a rush of energy goes through me. I'm awake, my eyes wide open, my hands warm. I lower the gun. There is power in controlling something that can do so much damage. In controlling something, period. I smile a little. Maybe I do belong here. By the time we break for lunch, my arms throb from holding the gun and my fingers are hard to straighten. I massage them on my way to the dining hall. Christina invites Al to sit with us. Every time I look at him, I hear his sobs again, so I try not to look at him. I move my peas around with my fork, and my thoughts drift back to the aptitude tests, when Tori warned me that being divergent was dangerous. I felt like it was branded on my face, and if I so much as turned the wrong way, someone would see it. So far, it hasn't been a problem, but that doesn't make me feel safe. What if I let my guard down and something terrible happens? Oh, come on. You don't remember me? Christina says, as Al makes a sandwich. We were in math together just a few days ago, and I am not a quiet person. I slept through math most of the time, Al replies. It was first hour. What if the danger doesn't come soon? What if it strikes years from now and I never see it coming? Tris, says Christina. She snaps her fingers in front of my face. You in there? What? What is it? I asked if you ever remember taking a class with me, she says. I mean, no offense, but I probably wouldn't remember if you did. All the abnegation looked the same to me. I mean, they still do, but now you're not one of them. I stare at her, as if I need to be reminded. I'm sorry, am I being rude? She asks. I'm used to saying whatever's on my mind. Mom used to say that politeness is deception in pretty packaging. I think that's why our factions don't usually associate with each other, I say, with a short laugh. Candor and abnegation don't hate each other the way erudite and abnegation do, but they avoid each other. Candor's real problem is with amity. Those who seek peace above all else, they say, will always deceive to keep the water calm. Can I sit here? Says Will, tapping on the table with his finger. What, you don't want to hang out with your erudite buddies? Says Christina. They aren't my buddies, says Will, setting his plate down. Just because we were in the same faction doesn't mean we get along. Plus, Edward and Myra are dating, and I'd rather not be the third wheel. Edward and Myra, the other erudite transfers, sit 2 tables away. So close they bump elbows as they cut their food. Myra pauses to kiss Edward. I watch them carefully. I've only seen a few kisses in my life. Edward turns and presses his lips to Myra's. Air hisses between my teeth, and I look away. Part of me waits for them to be scolded. Another part wonders, with a touch of desperation, what it would feel like to have someone's lips against mine. Do they have to be so public? I say.
She just kissed him. Al frowns at me. When he frowns, his thick eyebrows touch his eyelashes. It's not like they're stripping naked. A kiss is not something you do in public. Al, Will, and Christina all give me the same knowing smile. What? I say. Your abnegation is showing, says Christina. The rest of us are all right with a little affection in public. Oh, I shrug. Well, I guess I'll have to get over it then.
Or you can stay frigid,
says Will, his eyes glinting with mischief. You know, if you want. Christina throws a roll at him. He catches it and bites it. Don't be mean to her, she says. Frigidity is in her nature, sort of like being a know-it-all is in yours. I am not frigid, I exclaim.
Don't worry about it, says Will. It's endearing. Look, you're all red.
The comment only makes my face hotter. Everyone else chuckles. I force a laugh, and after a few seconds, it comes naturally. It feels good to laugh again. After lunch, 4 leads us to a new room. It's huge, with wood floor that's cracked and creaky and has a large circle painted in the middle. On the left is a green board, a chalkboard. My lower level teacher used one, but I haven't seen one since then. Maybe it has something to do with Dauntless priorities. Training comes first, technology comes second. Our names are written on the board in alphabetical order. Hanging at 3-foot intervals along one end of the room are faded black punching bags. We line up behind them and 4 stands in the middle where we can all see him.
As I said this morning, says 4, next you'll learn how to fight. The purpose of this is to prepare you to act, to prepare your body to respond to threats and challenges, which you will need if you intend to survive life as a Dauntless.
I can't even think of life as a Dauntless. All I can think about is making it through initiation.
We will go over technique today, and tomorrow you will start fighting each other, says 4. So I recommend that you pay attention. Those who don't learn fast will get hurt.
4 names a few different punches, demonstrating each one as he does. First against the air, and then against the punching bag. I catch on as we practice. Like with the gun, I need a few tries to figure out how to hold myself and how to move my body to make it look like his. The kicks are more difficult, though he only teaches us the basics. The punching bag stings my hand and my feet, turning my skin red, and barely moves no matter how hard I hit it. All around me is the sound of skin hitting tough fabric. 4 wanders through the crowd of initiates, watching us as we go through the movements again. When he stops in front of me, my insides twists like someone stirring them with a fork. He stares at me, his eyes following my body from my head to my feet, not leading anywhere, not lingering anywhere, a practical, scientific gaze. You don't have much muscle, he says, which means you're better off using your knees and elbows. You can put more power behind them. Suddenly, he presses a hand to my stomach. His fingers are so long that the heel of his hand touches one side of my rib cage, and his fingertips still touch the other side. My heart pounds so hard my chest hurts, and I stare at him, wide-eyed. Never forget to keep tension here, he says, in a quiet voice. 4 lifts his hand and keeps walking. I feel the pressure of his palm even after he's gone. It's strange, but I have to stop and breathe for a few seconds before I can keep practicing again. When 4 dismisses us for dinner, Christina nudges me with her elbow. I'm surprised he didn't break you in half, she says. She wrinkles her nose. He scares the hell out of me. It's that quiet voice he uses. Yeah, I look over my shoulder at him. He's quiet and remarkably self-possessed, but I wasn't afraid he would hurt me. Definitely intimidating, I finally say. Al, who is in front of us, turns around once we reach the pit and announces, "I want to get a tattoo." From behind us, Will says, "A tattoo of what?" "I don't know," Al laughs. "I just want to feel like I've actually left the old faction. Stop crying about it." When we don't respond, he adds, "I know you've heard me." "Yeah, learn to quiet down, will ya?" Christina pokes Al's thick arm. "I think you're right. We're half in, half out right now. If we want all the way in, we should look the part." She gives me a look. "No, I will not cut my hair, or dye it a strange color, or pierce my face." "How about your belly button?" she says. "Or your nipple," says Will with a snort. I groan. Now that training is done for the day, we can do whatever we want until it's time to sleep. The idea makes me feel almost giddy, although that might be from fatigue. The pit is swarming with people. Christina announces that she and I will meet Al and Will at the tattoo parlor, and she drags me toward the clothing place. We stumble up the path, climbing higher above the pit floor, scattering stones with our shoes. "What's wrong with my clothes?" I say. "I'm not wearing gray anymore." "They're ugly and gigantic," she sighs. "Will you just let me help you? If you don't like what I put you in, you never have to wear it again. I promise." 10 minutes later, I stand in front of a mirror in the clothing place, wearing a knee-length black dress. The skirt isn't full, but it isn't stuck to my thighs either, like the first one she picked out, which I refused. Goosebumps appear on my bare arms. She slips the tie from my hair, and I shake it out of its braid, so it hangs wavy over my shoulders. Then she holds up a black pencil. "Eyeliner," she says. "You aren't going to be able to make me pretty, you know." I close my eyes and hold still. She runs the tip of the pencil along the line of my eyelashes. I imagine standing before my family in these clothes, and my stomach twists like I might be sick. Who cares about pretty? I'm going for noticeable. I open my eyes, and for the first time stare openly at my own reflection. My heart rate picks up as I do, like I'm breaking the rules and will be scolded for it. It will be difficult to break the habits of thinking the abnegation instilled in me, like tugging a single thread from a complex work of embroidery. But I will find new habits, new thoughts, new rules. I will become something else. My eyes were blue before, but a dull, grayish blue. The eyeliner makes them piercing. With my hair framing my face, my features look softer and fuller. I'm not pretty. My eyes are too big, and my nose is too long. But I can see that Christina is right. My face is noticeable. Looking at myself now isn't like seeing myself for the first time. It's like seeing someone else for the first time. Beatrice was a girl I saw in stolen moments in the mirror, who kept quiet at the dinner table. This is someone whose eyes claim mine and don't release me. This is Tris. "See?" she says. "You're striking." Under the circumstances, it's the best compliment she could have given me. I smile at her in the mirror. "You like it?" she says. "Yeah," I nod. "I look like a different person." She laughs. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" I look at myself head on again. For the first time, the idea of leaving my abnegation identity behind me doesn't make me nervous. It gives me hope. "A good thing." I shake my head. "Sorry, I've just never been allowed to stare at my reflection for this long." "Really?" Christina shakes her head. Abnegation is a strange faction, I have to tell you. Let's go watch Al get tattooed, I say. Despite the fact that I've left my old faction behind, I don't want to criticize it yet. At home, my mother and I picked up nearly identical stacks of clothing every 6 months or so. It's easy to allocate resources when everyone gets the same thing, but everything is more varied at the Dauntless compound. Every Dauntless gets a certain amount of points to spend per month, and the dress costs one of them. Christina and I race down the narrow path to the tattoo place. When we get there, Al is sitting in the chair already, as a small, narrow man with more ink than bare skin is drawing a spider on his arm. Will and Christina flip through books of pictures, elbowing each other when they find a good one. When they sit next to each other, I notice how opposite they are. Christina, dark and lean. Will, pale and solid, but alike in their easy smiles. I wander around the room, looking at the artwork on the walls. These days, the only artists are in Amity. Abnegation sees art as impractical, and its appreciation as time that could have been spent serving others. So I've seen works of art in textbooks. I've never been in a decorated room before. It makes the air feel close and warm, and I could get lost in here for hours without noticing. I skim the wall with my fingertips. A picture of a hawk reminds me of Tori's tattoo. Beneath it is a sketch of a bird in flight. It's a raven, the voice behind me says. Pretty, right? I turn to see Tori standing there, and I feel like I'm back in the aptitude test room, with the mirrors all around me and the wires connected to my forehead. I didn't expect to see her again. Well, hello there, she smiles. Never thought I'd see you again. Beatrice, is it? Triss, actually, I say. Do you work here? I do. I took a break to administer the tests. Most of the time I'm here. She taps her chin. I recognize that name. You were the first jumper, weren't you? Yes, I was. Well done. Thanks. I touch the sketch of the bird. Listen, I need to talk to you about. I glance over at Will and Christina. I can't corner Tori now. They'll ask questions. Something. Sometime. I'm not sure that would be wise, she says quietly. I helped you as much as I could. And now you'll have to go it alone. I purse my lips. She has answers. I know she does. And if she won't give them to me now, I'll have to find another way to make her tell me some other time. Want a tattoo? She says. The bird sketch holds my attention. I never intended to get pierced or tattooed when I came here. I know that if I do, it will place another wedge between me and my family that I can never remove. And if my life here continues as how it's been, it may soon be the least of the wedges between us. But I understand now what Tori said about her tattoo representing a fear she overcame, a reminder of where she was, as well as a reminder of where she is now. Maybe there's a way to honor my old life as I embrace my new one. Yes, I say. 3 of these flying birds. I touch my collarbone, marking their path of flight toward my heart. 1 for each member of the family I left behind. Chapter 9. Since there's still an odd number of you, one of you won't be fighting today, says 4, stepping away from the blackboard in the training room. He gives me a look. The space next to my name is blank. The knot from my stomach unravels. A reprieve. This isn't good, says Christina, nudging me with her elbow. Her elbow prods one of my sore muscles. I have more sore muscles than not sore muscles this morning, and I wince. Ow. Sorry, she says. But look, I'm up against the tank. Christine and I sat together at breakfast, and earlier she shielded me from the rest of the dormitory as I changed. I haven't had a friend like her before. Susan was better friends with Caleb than me, and Robert only went where Susan went. I guess I haven't really had a friend, period. It's impossible to have a real friendship when no one feels like they can accept help or even talk about themselves. That won't happen here. I already know more about Christina than I ever knew about Susan, and it's only been 2 days. The tank? I find Christina's name on the board. It's written next to it is Molly. Yeah, Peter's slightly more feminine-looking minion, she says, nodding toward the cluster of people on the other side of the room. Molly is tall, like Christina, but that's where the similarities end. She has broad shoulders, bronze skin, and a bulbous nose. Those three, Christina points at Peter, Drew, and Molly in turn, have been inseparable since they crawled out of the room, practically. I hate them. Will and Al stand across the room from each other in the arena. They put their hands up by their faces to protect themselves, as Four taught us, and shuffle in a circle around each other. Al is half a foot taller than Will, and twice as broad. I stare at him, realizing that even his facial features are big. Big nose, big lips, big eyes. This fight won't last long. I glance at Peter and his friends. Drew is shorter than both Peter and Molly, but he's built like a boulder, and his shoulders are always hunched. His hair is orange-red, the color of an old carrot. What's wrong with them? I say. Peter is pure evil. When we were kids, he'd pick fights with people from other factions, and then, when an adult came to break it up, he'd cry and make up some story about how the other kids started it. And of course they believed him, because we were candor and we couldn't lie. Ha ha. Christina wrinkles her nose and adds, Drew is just his sidekick. I doubt he has an independent thought in his brain. And Molly? She's the kind of person who fries ants with a magnifying glass just to watch them flail around. In the arena, Al punches Will hard in the jaw. I wince. Across the room, Eric smirks at Al and turns one of the rings in his eyebrow. Will stumbles to the side, one hand pressed to his face, and blocks Al's next punch with his free hand. Judging by his grimace, blocking the punch is just as painful as a blow would have been. Al is slow, but powerful. Peter, Drew, and Molly cast furtive looks in our directions and then pull their heads together, whispering. I think they know we're talking about them, I say. So? They already know I hate them. They do? How? Christina fakes a smile at them and waves. I look down, my cheeks warm. I shouldn't be gossiping, anyway. Gossiping is self-indulgent. Will hooks a foot around one of Al's legs and yanks back, knocking Al to the ground. Al scrambles to his feet. Because I've told them, she says, through gritted teeth. Her teeth are straight on top and crooked on the bottom. She looks at me. We try to be pretty honest about our feelings in candor. Plenty of people told me that they don't like me, and plenty of people haven't. Who cares? We just weren't supposed to hurt people, I say. I'd like to think I'm helping them by hating them, she says. I'm reminding them that they aren't God's gift to humankind. I laugh a little at that and focus on the arena again. Will and Al face each other for a few more seconds, more hesitant than they were before. Will flicks his pale hair from his eyes. They glance at 4 like they're waiting for him to call the fight off, but he stands with his arms folded, giving no response. A few feet away from him, Eric checks his watch. After a few seconds of circling, Eric shouts, "Do you think this is a leisure activity? Should we break for nap time? Fight each other." But Al straightens, letting his hands down, and says, "Is it scored or something? When does the fight end?" "It ends when one of you is unable to continue," says Eric. "According to the Dauntless rules," 4 says, "one of you could also concede." Eric narrows his eyes at 4. "According to the old rules," he says, "in the new rules, no one concedes. A brave man acknowledges the strength of others," 4 says. "One of you," 4 replies, "a brave man never surrenders." 4 and Eric stare at each other for a few seconds. I feel like I'm looking at 2 different kinds of Dauntless, the honorable kind and the ruthless kind. But even I know that in this room, it's Eric, the youngest leader of Dauntless, who has the authority. Beads of sweat dot Al's forehead. He wipes them with the back of his hand. "This is ridiculous," Al says, shaking his head. "What's the point of beating him up? We're in the same faction." "Oh, you think it's going to be that easy?" Will asks, grinning. "Go ahead, try to hit me, slowpoke." Will puts his hands up again. I see the determination in Will's eyes that wasn't there before. Does he really believe he can win? One hard shot in the head, and Al will knock him out cold. That is, if he can actually hit Will. Al tries a punch, and Will ducks, the back of his neck shining with sweat. He dodges another punch, slipping around Al and kicking him hard in the back. Al lurches forward and turns. When I was younger, I read a book about grizzly bears. There is a picture of one standing on its hind legs with its paws outstretched, roaring. That is how Al looks now. He charges at Will, grabbing his arm so he can't slip away, and punches him hard in the jaw. I watch the light leave Will's eyes, which are pale green like celery. They roll back into his head, and all the tension falls from his body. He slips from Al's grasp, dead weight, and crumples to the floor. Cold rushes down my back and fills my chest. Al's eyes widen as he crouches next to Will, tapping his cheek with one hand. The room falls silent as we wait for Will to respond. For a few seconds he doesn't. He just lies on the ground with an arm bent beneath him. He blinks, clearly dazed. "Get him up," says Eric, his eyes greedy, looking at Will's fallen body, like it's the sight of a meal and he hasn't eaten in weeks. The curl of his lip is cruel. Ford turns to the chalkboard and circles Al's name. Victory. "Next up, Molly and Christina," shouts Eric. Al pulls Will's arm across his shoulders and drags him out of the arena. Christina cracks her knuckles. I would wish her good luck, but I don't know what good that would do. Christina isn't weak, but she's much narrower than Molly. Hopefully, her height will help her. Across the room, Ford supports Will from the waist and leads him out. Al stands for a moment by the door, watching them go. Ford leaving makes me nervous. Leaving us with Eric is like hiring a babysitter who spends his time sharpening knives. Christina tucks her hair behind her ears. It's chin length, black, and pinned back with silver clips. She cracks another knuckle. She looks nervous, and no wonder. Who wouldn't be nervous after watching Will collapse like a rag doll? If conflict in Dauntless ends with only one person standing, I'm unsure of what this part of the initiation will do to me. Will I be Al, standing over a man's body, knowing I'm the one who put him on the ground? Or will I be Will, lying in a helpless heap? And is it selfish of me to crave victory, or is it brave? I swipe my sweaty palms on my pants. I snap to attention when Christina kicks Molly on the side. Molly gasps and grits her teeth like she's about to growl through them. A lock of stringy black hair falls across her face, but she doesn't brush it away. Al stands next to me, but I'm too focused on the new fight to look at him or congratulate him on winning, assuming that's what he wants. I'm not sure. Molly smirks at Christina and without warning dives, hands outstretched at Christina's midsection. She hits her hard, knocking her down and pins her to the ground. Christina thrashes, but Molly is heavy and doesn't budge. She punches, and Christina moves her head out of the way, but Molly just punches again and again, until her fists hit Christina's jaw, her nose, her mouth. Without thinking, I grab Al's arm and squeeze as tightly as I can. I just need something to hold on to. Blood runs down the side of Christina's face and splatters on the ground next to her cheek. This is the first time I've ever prayed for someone to fall unconscious. But she doesn't. Christina screams and drags one of her arms free. She punches Molly in the ear, knocking her off balance, and wriggles free. She comes to her knees, holding her face with one hand. The blood streaming from her nose is thick and dark and covers her fingers in second. She screams again and crawls away from Molly. I can tell by the heaving of her shoulders that she's sobbing, but I can barely hear her over the throbbing in my own ears. Please go unconscious. Molly kicks Christina's side, sending her sprawling back. Al frees his hand and pulls me tight to his side. I clench my teeth to keep from crying out. I had no sympathy for Al the first night, but I'm not cruel yet. The sight of Christina clutching her ribcage makes me want to stand between her and Molly. Stop, wails Christina, as Molly pulls her foot back to kick again. She holds out a hand. Stop. She coughs. I'm done. Molly smiles, and I sigh with relief. Al sighs too, his ribcage lifting and falling against my shoulder. Eric walks toward the center of the room, his movements slow, and stands over Christina with his arms folded. He says quietly, I'm sorry. What did you say? You're done? Christina pushes herself to her knees. When she takes her hand from the ground, it leaves a red handprint behind. She pinches her nose to stop the bleeding and nods. Get up, he says. If he had yelled, I might not have felt like everything inside my stomach was about to come out of it. If he had yelled, I would have known that the yelling was the worst he planned to do. But his voice is quiet, and his words precise. He grabs Christina's arm and yanks her to her feet, and drags her out the door. Follow me, he says to the rest of us, and we do. I feel the roar of the river in my chest. We stand near the railing. The pit is almost empty. It is the middle of the afternoon, though it feels like it's been night for days. If there were people around, I doubt any of them would help Christina. We are with Eric, for one thing, and for another, the Dauntless have different rules that brutality does not violate. Eric shoves Christina against the railing. Climb over it, he says. What? She says like she expects him to relent, but her eyes wide and her ashen face suggest otherwise.
Eric will not back down. Climb over the railing, Eric says, again, pronouncing each word slowly. If you can hang over the chasm for 5 minutes, I will forget your cowardice. If you can't, I will not allow you to continue initiation. The railing is narrow and made of metal. The spray from the river coats it, making it slippery and cold. Even if Christina is brave enough to hang from the railing for 5 minutes, she may not be able to hold on. Either she decides to be factionless, or she risks death. When I close my eyes, I imagine her falling onto the jagged rocks below and shudder. Fine, she says, her voice shaking. She is tall enough to swing her leg over the railing. Her foot shakes. She puts her toe on the ledge as she lifts the other leg over. Facing us, she wipes her hands on her pants and holds onto the railing so hard her knuckles turn white. Then she takes one foot off the ledge, and the other. I can see her face between the bars and the barrier, determined, her lips pressed together. Next to me, Al sets his watch. For the first minute and a half, Christina is fine. Her hands stay firm around the railing, and her arms don't shake. I start to think she might make it and show Eric how foolish he was to doubt her. But then the river hits the wall, and white water sprays against Christina's back. Her face strikes the barrier, and she cries out. Her hand slips, so she's just holding on by her fingertips. She tries to get a better grip, but now her hands are wet. If I help her, Eric would make my fate the same as hers. Will I let her fall to her death, or will I resign myself to being factionless? What's worse, to be idle when someone dies, or to be exiled and empty-handed? My parents would have no problem answering that question, but I am not my parents. As far as I know, Christina hasn't cried since we got here, but now her face crumples and she lets out a sob that is louder than the river. Another wave hits the wall, and the spray coats her body. One of the droplets hits my cheek. Her hands slip again, and this time one of them falls from the railing, so she's hanging by 4 fingertips. Come on, Christina, says Al, his low voice surprisingly loud. She looks at him. He claps. Come on, grab it again. You can do it. Grab it. Would I even be strong enough to hold on to her? Would it be worth my effort to try and help her if I know I'm too weak to do any good? I know what those questions are. Excuses. Human reason can excuse any evil. That's why it's so important that we don't rely on it. My father's words. Christina swings her arm, fumbling for the railing. No one cheers her on, but Al brings his big hands together and shouts, his eyes holding hers. I wish I could. I wish I could move, but I just stare at her and wonder how long I've been this disgustingly selfish. I stare at Al's watch. 4 minutes have passed. He elbows me hard in the shoulder. Come on, I say, my voice a whisper. I clear my throat. 1 minute left, I say, louder this time. Christina's other hand finds the railing again. Her arms shake so hard, I wonder if the earth is quaking beneath me, jiggling my vision, and I just didn't notice. Come on, Christina, Al and I say, as our voices join. I believe I might be strong enough to help her. I will help her if she slips again. I will. Another wave of water splashes against Christina's back, and she shrieks as both of her hands slip off the railing. A scream launches from my throat. It sounds like it belongs to someone else, but she doesn't fall. She grabs the bars of the barrier, her fingers sliding down the metal until I can't see her head anymore. They're all I see. Al's watch reads 5. 5 minutes are up, he says, almost spitting the words at Eric. Eric checks his own watch, taking his time, tilting his wrist, all while my stomach twists and I can't breathe. When I blink, I see Rita's sister on the pavement below the train tracks, limbs bent at strange angles. I see Rita screaming and sobbing. I see myself turning away.
Fine, Eric says. You can come up, Christina.
Al walks toward the railing.
No, Eric says. She has to do it on her own.
No, she doesn't,
Al growls. She did what you said. She's not a coward. She did what you said.
Eric doesn't respond. Al reaches over the railing, and he's so tall he can reach Christina's wrist. She grabs his forearm. Al pulls her up, his face red with frustration, and I run forward to help. I'm too short to do much good, as I suspected, but I grip Christina under the shoulder once she's high enough, and Al and I haul her over the barrier. She drops to the ground, her face still blood-smeared from her fight, her back soaking wet, her body quivering. I kneel next to her. Her eyes lift to mine and then shift to Al, and we all catch our breath together.